米スポーツジャーナリストのジュンリー氏が自身の YouTube チャンネルジュンリーで野球人気復活の真相を掘り下げました。番組では野球人気低迷していた時代からどう復活を遂げたのかを言及するとともに、大谷選手の存在がこの変化を象徴し加速させたと強調。一方でこの人気回復のもとには4つの不安要素があり、そのうち1つでも崩れればこの回復は再び揺らぎかねないと言及しました。その見どころある内容を日本語字幕付きでご紹介しますので、ぜひ最後までご覧ください。
Baseball's in major trouble.
I'm so bored.
This is the most boring game in all the universe.
But it's like boring on purpose.
I don't know how people go out there and watch games.
What could speed up the game and such?
This is what people thought baseball was. Slow, static, easy to ignore. But then, something changed.
Oh my goodness! Shohei Ohtani! Wow!
And then, this started happening. Attendance climbed for 3 straight years for the first time since 2007. Last year, the World Series drew its biggest audience in 8 years. The average ticket buyer has gotten 6 years younger. So how did this actually happen? Because to understand how baseball got here, you have to understand a few things. What went wrong, what baseball actually fixed, what the rest of the world changed around it, and more important than that, is it going to be able to last? One of the things that people don't really talk about with this era of baseball that everyone complained about was too slow, was that the baseball was incredible. Mike Trout was putting up the best numbers anyone had seen in a generation. Bryce Harper was living up to all the hype that came with being a teenage prodigy. Mookie Betts was one of the sport's most dynamic players in years. I spent years in sports media trying to figure out how to make Mike Trout interesting, and it was genuinely hard. This was a guy who was arguably the most talented player that baseball had seen since Willie Mays. But his biggest hobby off the field, the most interesting thing about his personality, was that outside of baseball, he liked studying the weather, which, to be fair, is a completely valid hobby, but isn't really something you can market an entire sport around. This wasn't a talent problem. Baseball was quietly in the middle of one of the deepest talent eras it had ever produced. The sport just had trouble getting people to notice. Jake Mintz and Jordan Schusterman cover baseball for Yahoo Sports.
I'm looking at wins above replacement from 2010 to 2015. If you look at the top, 13 players, only one of them, and that's Robinson Cano, is playing in what you would call one of the top 5 markets. So you have Trout, great player, not this effervescent, outgoing personality, and I think MLB didn't really know how to best market that.
And that problem reaching fans was about to get much, much worse. In 2003, Michael Lewis wrote a book called Moneyball. Brad Pitt played Billy Beane in the movie. Jonah Hill was the nerd with the laptop. The book was about the Oakland A's using statistics to find undervalued players and compete with teams that had 10 times their payroll. So every team optimized for the 3 outcomes the math loved most: walk, strikeout, home run. Games got longer, balls in play got rarer. The sport optimized for winning, but nobody optimized for watching. MLB knew. They knew for years. Commissioners talked about pace of play going back to the mid-2000s. The analytics arms race was visible to anyone paying attention. The sport had solved the wrong puzzle, and everyone inside the sport could see it. They just didn't do anything about it. Which brings us to this question. Why not?
As this problem was reaching its peak, we didn't care. We were like, this is our favorite sport. We're trying to make a career in this. We were like, oh my God, this is so great. What's the problem? Oh yeah, the game's long. Who cares? I'm not bored.
We were also 23 and not married and didn't have hobbies. I'm up till 2? Sure.
Because of how baseball's economics are structured, a lot of owners don't actually need to win to make money, which is a topic I covered in an earlier video on this channel. MLB has no salary cap, it has revenue sharing, it has a luxury tax that operates as a soft ceiling instead of a hard one, and has local media rights deals that, until recently, paid teams a guaranteed check regardless of how many people actually watched, which meant for a 20-year stretch, it was completely rational from a return on investment standpoint for a lot of teams to be quietly mediocre and quietly profitable. If you owned a baseball team that made $40 million a year without you ever contending or trying to get into the playoffs, why would you spend $250 million a year to try to win the World Series? From a business perspective, this decision doesn't make a lot of sense to actually spend on a team that is good. By the late 2010s, cord cutting was gutting the bundle. By the early 2020s, the regional sports networks that owned baseball's local rights were going bankrupt. Diamond Sports, which operated the Bali channels carrying 14 different MLB teams, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2023. And suddenly, the business model that had insulated baseball from the cultural shift for 2 decades was gone. It also meant the sport was struggling to attract fans under the age of 35. There was a narrative that baseball was dying, but that's not the entire story because the talent was there. The product was world class. The issue was that the system to distribute and have fans actually watch baseball was broken. And as a result, the fans weren't there in the numbers that they used to be. And the owners didn't really have an incentive to fix it until the system truly broke. In 2023, Major League Baseball did something it had been resisting for decades. It admitted the game was broken. Not the baseball part, the experience part. The pitch clock gets most of the credit, but the pitch clock wasn't the whole story. What MLB actually did in 2023 was a bundle. A pitch clock, a ban on defensive shifts, bigger bases, a limit on pickoff attempts. Each rule alone would have been a minor tweak. Together, they completely changed what a baseball game felt like. Average game time went from 3 hours and 10 minutes to 2 hours and 38 minutes. 3 straight seasons under 2 hours and 40 minutes, something that hasn't happened since Ronald Reagan was in the White House for his first term. And in my opinion, this is the most successful rules intervention in American sports history in the last 100 years. The NFL has been tinkering with kickoffs and pass interference for 20 years, and nobody can agree whether the game is better or worse. The NBA legalized hand checking, banned hand checking, and then introduced the three-point line. Basketball fans argue about every single one of those calls forever. MLB changed 4 rules in 1 offseason, and nobody, the players, the fans, the traditionalists, can really argue the product isn't better.
The whole Manfred tenure of all the issues and all the problems, and that of which there have been many, and of which there still will be to come, that are worthy of plenty of honest discussion and criticism and everything. The legacy is going to be the legacy, and the legacy is going to be that the baseball was pitch clock and all these other rule changes. That's what I think is going to be remembered in 10, 20, 30 years. And
the rule changes were baseball finally saying out loud, the people watching the games matter. How they experience watching the game matters. And it was one of the most important things that baseball has done in the sport's entire history. And then at exactly the moment baseball was fixing its product, the sport produced the most improbable star in its history. Shohei Ohtani is not a baseball player. He is a baseball anomaly. He pitches at the highest level in the world. He hits at the highest level in the world. He does both things in the same game, which nobody has done at this level since Babe Ruth 100 years ago. And Ruth stopped pitching at 24 because it was too hard. Ohtani does it in his 30s, coming off 2 elbow reconstructions and a league full of pitchers throwing 100 miles an hour. Ohtani is one of the greatest athletes that we have ever seen in human history. But at the same time, he's also the perfect athlete for Major League Baseball, meeting this specific media moment.
Ohtani Judge are so easy to understand. Their greatness does not need a second level of baseball knowledge to comprehend. That guy's so big. He hits it real far. That guy plays both positions. Thanks for tuning in. You know? Whereas, like, for me to explain the magic of Ben Zobrist, like, I need an hour.
But the most important thing Ohtani did for baseball is making the Los Angeles Dodgers into a global franchise. 50% of Japanese sports fans now describe themselves as interested in Major League Baseball. Of the Japanese fans who follow MLB, 59% say the Dodgers are their favorite team. The Yankees are second at 14%. The Cubs are third at 9%. Game 7 of the 2025 World Series drew 12 million viewers in Japan. The entire World Series averaged more than 10 million Japanese viewers per game. Baseball's recovery is arguably more dependent on one player than any other sport in history. The only comparisons are Magic Johnson and Larry Bird for the NBA in the 1980s, and that led into Michael Jordan into the 1990s. Ohtani has done this pretty much by himself. And then something else started to happen too. Baseball started to have fun. Baseball had a decade of fighting about this. The unwritten rules, whether you could celebrate, whether you could showboat, whether the sport was supposed to be dignified or entertaining. And somewhere along the way, the old guard lost. Bat flips became standard. Dugout celebrations became choreographed. And then there's this whole other layer of cultural crossover. Paul Skeens is the best young pitcher in baseball. He's also dating Livy Dunn, the gymnast turned influencer with 13 million followers, who has become an enormous part of his audience. 15 years ago, Justin Verlander was dating supermodel Kate Upton, one of the best pitchers in baseball, one of the most famous models in the world. And the sport had almost no idea what to do with it. Skeens and Dunn are not bigger celebrities than Verlander and Upton were, but they exist inside an infrastructure that turns their relationship into content. And MLB is now leaning into that rather than pretending it isn't happening. And this same shift is showing up in the sports relationship to fashion. The Fear of God MLB partnership went from a Negro Leagues tribute line in 2020 to a multi-year official partnership in 2025. Jerry Lorenzo has basically become baseball's de facto fashion ambassador. Off-White did a capsule that sold for hundreds of dollars a shirt. Aimee Leon Dore has done a series of collaborations with Major League Baseball. MLB caps have always been in the culture. Yankees fitteds have been in hip-hop since the 1990s. Dodgers caps have been in Latin pop culture forever. But what's actually happening now is different. Baseball is borrowing credibility from fashion. But fashion is also now borrowing credibility from baseball, which if you had told the baseball writers of the 1980s that Off-White, a high fashion brand, was purposefully releasing caps and jerseys with holes on them and selling them for hundreds of dollars, those same baseball writers would have lugged a tank of propane to Major League Baseball's office and burned it down themselves. But all of this shows that baseball now understands how to be part of the culture and not just a league where baseball is played. And while the pitch clock was speeding baseball up, the broader culture was starting to slow itself down. Dumb phone sales are climbing for the first time in 15 years. Brain rot was the Oxford Word of the Year in 2024. There's a small but real movement of people actively trying to unplug from algorithmic feeds to reclaim attention, to find ambient experiences that don't demand every neuron they have.
But you have to view baseball, regular season baseball, as a second screen, in a way, as a podcast. You put the game on in the background, you fold your laundry, you do your dishes, you chop your onions and your garlic, and then if you hear the announcer up the tone of their voice, you know that something happened, you scooch over to the television, you watch the play, you text someone about it, and then you go back to your onions and your garlic. During the season, instead of doom scrolling, I'm boom scrolling. Home run.
But none of this was designed by Major League Baseball. The algorithms, the fashion houses, the rise of slow living, all of that was bigger than just baseball, and the sport was in a perfect position to meet the world where it's at. If most of the forces that save baseball were outside of the control of the league, what happens if those forces turn again? Because they always do. It's just how the world works. There's 4 fault lines under this recovery right now, and only one of them needs to break for this recovery to struggle again. On December 1st of 2026, the current collective bargaining agreement between Major League Baseball and the Players Association expires. Everyone in baseball, the owners, players, media, insiders, is preparing for a lockout. Rob Manfred and the owners want a salary cap, which they've wanted since the 1970s, and which the players have successfully fought off every single time. And the MLBPA have essentially told their members to expect a work stoppage. The last time this happened in 2021, the owners locked the players out for 99 days. The time before that, in 1994, was catastrophic. The 1994 strike canceled the World Series. It took baseball almost a decade to recover the audience it lost. Some argue it never fully did, that the steroid era of the 1990s was essentially a desperate marketing campaign to bring casual fans back. The fans that baseball just won back don't owe baseball anything, and they're only showing up because baseball is culturally interesting for the first time in years. But if the fans lose an entire season of games, if the players and the owners can't decide how to split up $10 million, if the owners refuse to spend more money on their teams, investing in the loyalty and passion of their fans, those fans might not come back. And baseball has shown in the past that it will do this to itself. It will shoot itself in the foot. And I'm really concerned that it's going to happen again. The second, in November 2025, Major League Baseball announced new media deals for the 2026 through 2028 seasons. The league went direct to consumer through streaming. It finally broke free of the collapsing regional sports network model. It positioned itself for the streaming era. But if you want to watch every nationally televised baseball game in 2026, you need 6 separate streaming subscriptions. Baseball broke the cable bundle. Then it rebuilt it, except this version is more expensive, more fragmented, and harder to navigate than the one it replaced. This matters because the recovery was, in significant part, an access story. Because the casual fan you just won back, the one who watched the World Series on Fox and then wanted to follow the Dodgers into the regular season, is now facing a subscription math problem most people are not going to solve. The RSN collapse was a gift that forced MLB to innovate, but the innovation it produced is a new maze, and mazes do not retain casual fans. The third fault line is a person. Shohei Ohtani is 31 years old. He had his elbow reconstructed twice. He's coming off a 2025 season in which he played most of the year as a designated hitter and gingerly eased back onto the mound in the second half. This year, he said he's going for a Cy Young Award. He is still on any given night the most exciting player in baseball. He's also running out the clock on the most improbable athletic career of the last 100 years. So much of Major League Baseball's cultural recovery has been dependent on him. And when Ohtani declines because Father Time is absolutely undefeated, what's going to replace him? Because there's not an obvious replacement for Shohei Ohtani. There might not ever be another Shohei Ohtani. And then there's the fourth fault line, the one that scares me the most, the one that I think about the most. In November 2025, federal prosecutors indicted 2 Cleveland Guardians pitchers, Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz, for allegedly rigging individual pitches inside live Major League Baseball games. Not outcomes, not games, not even live at-bats, specific individual pitches. Balls thrown outside the strike zone on purpose so that gamblers working with the pitchers could profit on the micro bets. The sport is now openly discussing integrity in a way that it hasn't had to since the Black Sox and Pete Rose scandals. The same structure that made baseball work again, small, believable moments, is exactly what gambling is breaking. And this is why I think gambling is the most dangerous of the fault lines. Baseball's recovery story is a story about the sport recovering trust. People believe and enjoy the rule changes because they believe that what they're seeing on the field is real. People love Shohei Ohtani because they believe that watching him pitch and watching him hit is a real thing that's happening. Content creators like myself have to believe that what they're watching is actually happening and worth creating videos, tweets, photos, whatever about. And every single one of those trust relationships starts to collapse the second fans start to believe that what they're seeing isn't actually real. The NBA already knows what this looks like. Jonte Porter in 2024, the federal investigations into Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups, and Damon Jones in 2025, the league's credibility in polling has cratered. A 2026 Sacred Heart University survey found the NBA is now the least trusted major American sports league. The NBA spent a decade being the most culturally relevant league in the country, and gambling is actively corroding that in real time. None of these are outside the range of things that Major League Baseball can navigate, but history has also shown that Major League Baseball isn't particularly great at navigating major scandals like this. And after a decade of hard work put into making baseball meet the cultural moment that it's in right now, we're going to see over the course of the next decade whether or not that work was enough to navigate the pressure that's coming for it in this moment.
And I think people maybe are yearning for a simpler time. And I think that, repurposing Americana is both useful, occasionally problematic, powerful, compelling. And I think no sport does a better job of that, of touching that part of the American psyche than baseball does.
Baseball is renting a moment that it didn't design. And its lease, at least for right now, is month to month. And what baseball decides to do next between the labor crisis, the gambling crisis, the fact that Shohei Ohtani is a once-in-a-century type player is going to determine what happens next to the future of the sport. And all of this will decide whether or not baseball's recovery becomes a generation or a blip in the matrix, and whether baseball earns its recovery or wastes it altogether is the only question that matters for the future of the sport. Thank you so much for watching.
最後までご覧いただきありがとうございました。今回の動画についてどういう感想を持たれましたか？ぜひコメント欄で意見や感想をお聞かせください。チャンネル登録やグッドボタンを押していただけると励みになります。それでは次回の動画でお会いしましょう。